Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Portland's Friday Forum, Oregon's premier public affairs forum. I'm Sharon Van Sickle-Robbins, City Club President, and I would like to welcome you all, those of you here at the Governor Hotel, and those of you listening on OPB or KBPS radio, or watching on Portland Community Media's CityNet 30. Thank you for joining City Club today on Friday, November 12th for today's Friday Forum. In consideration of those sitting close to you and those in our radio and television audiences, would you all please silence your cell phones? Today we're going to hear about the role of nonprofit organizations in communities and economies across the state, but first a few announcements. I'd like to start by recognizing our new City Club members, Consuelo Romansky, Norma Vincent, Sharon Nielsen. If you could please stand. And if there are any other new members here at the forum today, please stand. We'd like to welcome you. I'd also like to thank our media partners, including Oregon Business Magazine, and I'd like to offer our appreciation to our Friday Forum corporate sponsors, whose generous financial support makes these City Club luncheons possible. Please join me in offering our sincere appreciation to AARP Oregon, the law firm of Barron Liebman, the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, and PGE. If your company or firm would like to be a City Club sponsor, please contact City Club staff at the back of the room or call the City Club office. Also, City Club's annual fund is in full swing. Your donations to the annual fund play a significant role in supporting City Club's civic engagement efforts, which include citizen-led research, hands-on exploration of important issues, and of course our Friday forums. To make a donation to the annual fund, you can simply use the envelope that is on all of the tables, or you can hand it to the City Club folks at the back of the room, or donate online at City Club's website, www.pdxcityclub.org. And now to today's program. As the recession continues to impact individuals and families, and budget cuts force government agencies to reduce services, Oregonians increasingly rely on the nonprofit sector for assistance. Today, our guest panel will explore the challenges confronting the nonprofit sector and discuss the innovative strategies nonprofits are using to meet critical community needs during these tough economic times. Our first speaker today is Kay Sohl. Ms. Sohl is a consultant and trainer working with community-based nonprofit organizations on financial strategies, redeveloping business models, and board governance issues. She has worked with over 5,000 nonprofits and funding agencies from all 50 states, including organizations that focus on community action, domestic violence programs, land trusts, and affordable housing. She is co-author of the Oregon Nonprofit Corporation Handbook and teaches nonprofit financial management for the Portland State University School of Public Administration. Our second speaker today will be Kay Toran. As the president and CEO of Volunteers of America, Oregon, she provides overall leadership and strategic direction for this social services organization, which works to improve the lives of Oregon's children, families, and seniors. She joined the organization in 1999 from the Oregon State Office for Services to Children and Families, Oregon's Child Protective Services Agency, where she served as director for 6 years. She previously served as Oregon's Administrator of Purchasing, and under Governor Vic Atiyeh was State's Director of Affirmative Action. And our final speaker today will be Norm Smith. He became president of the Ford Family Foundation in 1997. His career includes 13 years as an executive with AT&T, 11 years of law practice, and 3 terms as a member of the Oregon House of Representatives. He is a member of the Oregon State Bar. He is a 4th-generation Oregonian, a graduate of Northwestern University and Willamette University College of Law. He's board chair at the Oregon Cultural Trust and serves on the boards of the Chalkbird Project, Philanthropy Northwest, and the Oregon State Capitol Foundation. And now I'd like to welcome Ms. Sohl to the podium.
Well, thank you, Sharon, and I want to thank members of the City Club for inviting us to talk with you about the nonprofit sector. And we've planned our comments together, and my role is to give you a bit of the framework about the scope and scale and impact of the sector, and to just begin talking about some of the tremendous challenges that the sector confronts, and also some of the opportunities that I think all of us have to work through the nonprofit sector to create the quality of life that we want in every community in Oregon. So I want to start by asking you to do something, and I would like each of you to silently think of a number. Now, the number I want you to be thinking of is the number of nonprofit organizations in Oregon today. Everybody holding the number in your mind? I'm going to be thinking of a number while you think of your number, and I'm going to be thinking of a number that would represent the percentage of Oregonians who are impacted by nonprofit organizations every year. Well, you get to go first, and if you guessed 15,000, you are right. We have 15,000 of the nonprofit organizations that the IRS thinks of as having a public benefit. Now, you're familiar with these organizations because they're the 501c3 organizations that you can get a tax deduction if you make a charitable gift to. Now, 15,000 sounds like a lot of organizations for a relatively small state. And the fact of the matter is, here in Oregon, they are providing essential human services, they are sustaining the arts, they do build our affordable housing, they care for our youngest and our oldest, and they also create forums and opportunities to discuss public policy, as City Club does every month of the year. Now, of those 15,000, 10,000 are very small organizations. They are almost all volunteer. They are the community choirs, the tiny food pantry efforts, the community gardens. They're the groups of people who get together around a passion, whether it's a passion for ferrets or a passion for foreign films, they are together. And as important as they are to the nonprofit sector, we're actually going to be focusing our energy and our efforts today on talking about the part of the sector that really is the workhorse of the nonprofit sector. And those are the nonprofit organizations that are operating throughout the state and without which there are thousands of Oregonians who would not eat today, they would not sleep inside, they would find no help to shake addictions. They would find no refuge from domestic violence. Oregon's nonprofits are a major factor in the quality of life in every community in the state. Without our cultural workhorse organizations, our spirits would no longer soar with a symphony, take flight with Whitebird or another dance performance, or here in Portland, experience the medieval mystery of chant through Cantores in Ecclesia and Capella Romana, two groups founded here in Oregon who are now world-renowned for restoring music. So now I'm ready to come back to my guess. Hopefully you guessed 15,000. Well, my guess about the percentage of Oregonians whose lives are impacted by nonprofits is 100%. And I think by the time we get through talking today, it's going to be pretty clear that that is a pretty good guess of the impact of the nonprofit sector. And we were talking before we started and said, gee, it looks like we might be about to preach to the choir, because we see in the room today hundreds of you who are volunteers, many, many of you who serve as board members. I suspect every one of you at the tables here and at the chairs in City Club and every one of our radio audience people is a donor to at least one nonprofit organization. So we are the nonprofit sector represented together. And I think all of us have experienced the reality that once you become part of this sector as a volunteer, as a board member, as a donor, or as a participant in their services, you are deeply influenced. You are able to live out your values and feel a connection to your neighbors and your community. Now, some of those of us in this room today, and probably many more in the radio audience, are part of the 12% of Oregon's private, non-governmental workforce who actually work for nonprofit organizations. And that is a higher than average percentage that we have here in the state. I think many of you all around the state who are in business are completely aware of the impact of nonprofit organizations on your economies. The IRS's latest estimate for the number of dollars flowing through Oregon's nonprofits is $65 billion a year. That is a huge economic impact. Now, you may wonder where all that money comes from, and as we get to the end of the year here, you may start receiving all of these appeals, and you may think that all $65 billion comes out of your pocket as you are asked for charitable gifts. And it is true that if you are a donor to an Oregon nonprofit, you are in some very good company. And I know we have the Oregon Community Foundation folks here, and their Giving in Oregon study will tell you that at least $1.4 billion in charitable gifts go into Oregon nonprofits every year, and probably more than that. But what you may not know is that a much larger share of the income flowing into Oregon's nonprofits, actually close to 70%, is what the IRS calls earned income. And that is the income that is generated through fees for services and products. And so you might be thinking, well, who on earth are the customers that would provide 70% of all the income supporting our nonprofits? And the answer would be all of us, as we pay for tickets to attend cultural events. We pay for fees for counseling when stress overwhelms us. We purchase great environmental publications. We purchase childcare, and increasingly we purchase adult daycare for our family members. And among the customers, and a major customer that we're going to be talking about, is actually the state of Oregon. And each municipality, each county and city is a major customer because Oregon is one of the leaders in the nation in governmental entities contracting with nonprofit organizations to deliver services that would otherwise be delivered by public employees. We have led the nation in that area, and as a result, when you hear about public sector responsibilities, when you hear about things like sheltering the homeless or building affordable housing or substance abuse treatment or restoring stream beds, caring for abused children, all of these things are actually being carried out through the nonprofit sector. Oregon's nonprofits are, in fact, the infrastructure that sustains the quality of life. And Kay is going to be talking a lot about the challenges that are emerging, particularly in the human services, as we all go through the state's budget crisis and the crisis of the recession. The other piece of the role of the sector that I want us to take a few moments and reflect on, though, is the reality that in Oregon, nonprofit organizations are the incubators for major innovation. And it's not just innovation here in Oregon, it's innovation around the world. And I look out and I see some people who I know were in Oregon in the 1970s. And if you were here then, you know that it was nonprofit organizations that created the first recycling centers. It was nonprofit organizations that transformed our whole understanding of domestic violence and sexual assault. And actually, back then, it was nonprofit organizations that persuaded us that we might be able to get ourselves to work on a bicycle. All ideas that are now just run-of-the-mill ideas. But right now, you may not know that it is an Oregon nonprofit that has provided leadership in the country in finally figuring out a way to get fresh meat and fresh produce into the food boxes that are given to our neediest citizens. And that's a program of the Oregon Food Bank where they actually figured out how to build relationships with Oregon's farmers and orchardists and cattlemen and get donated fresh produce, fresh meat into those food boxes. And that is now being replicated nationally as a result of the leadership that we showed. You may not realize that it is Oregon's Ford Family Foundation that Norm now heads that has innovated with a model in rural communities to support the development of new and, in many cases, unexpected leaders to step forward and pull whole communities together to rebuild economies. You may not know that in Oregon, it is nonprofit organizations that have provided national leadership in using structures that combine the tax code with innovative business strategies to create land trusts, energy and water trusts, to lead the nation in the development of new market tax credits, to lead in the development of IDA tax credits, all strategies that those of you who remember the Tom Lehrer song about doing well by doing good come down to ways that people are investing in their community and receiving a financial benefit. And finally, you may not realize the extent to which Oregon's innovation has led the nation in our work internationally, and that the programs of Mercy Corps and Medical Teams International are now the gold standard for economic development around the world. And similarly, that for the thousands of immigrants and refugees who have come to Oregon, we have led the nation in the creation of the largest and most successful international refugee organization. So Oregon's nonprofits are having a profound effect on the nonprofits, on the communities they serve. And as we go into the rest of our discussion, we're going to be talking about some of the challenges that they are experiencing and also some of the opportunities that all of us have to change the quality of life within our communities through nonprofits. And that takes us to a perfect point to introduce Kay Toran, leader of one of Oregon's most outstanding nonprofit organizations.
Thank you, Kay, and good afternoon. It's truly my pleasure to be here with you to talk about Volunteers of America's service system that tries to meet the need in our community, but also to talk about how we have been responding to a very changing environment in which nonprofits do their work. It's really my pleasure to be here, and I'm really pleased to see all of you here to participate in this conversation. Today, in so many corporate and administrative offices, conference rooms, and public forums, the discussion focus is on how to deliver the products and services with fewer resources. One hears many conversations that speak to how business and businesses need to do the work differently, more creatively, and doing more with less. Whether it is the private sector that is selling widgets or a government that is responsible for services, or the nonprofit sector, which is responsible for what I like to call the good in our community, we are all faced with achieving our goals within an environment of fewer resources. And although I would like to stand before you as I would like to stand before my own organization and say we can do less with less, the reality is that's not an option. Today, this environment is being called the new normal. It is one constant that we face daily, and that's the constant of change. Change is the new normal, and I believe we will be involved in changing the way we do our work, changing the way we respond to our publics, changing the way we provide services for the foreseeable future. That is the new normal. And it will require all of us to be able to adjust, to adapt, and to be able to be responsive and not reactive, to be able to meet that need. The resources needed to serve the most vulnerable populations in our society have been in decline for the last decade or longer. It is not a recent phenomenon. Our reality did not happen just over the last few years. The dearth of resources became more pronounced over the last several years because of the collapse of so many of the institutions on which we depend. The challenge now is how to respond and to respond effectively, how to be proactive and not reactive. We must recognize that to meet the need, we have to change how we do business. We have to change how we work together, or we have to begin to value working together. We recognize that the process of planning, adapting, and implementing new ideas is one of the reasons that we will be able to be successful. One thing is crystal clear, and I think we all know this, and we all can see it. Government no longer has the capacity to respond to the needs in our community. The public is saying we can no longer afford to pay taxes to pay for the services that government provides. I'm one that does not believe people say they don't want to pay taxes because they don't want to pay taxes. I believe it's directly related to the fact that the cost of living in all of our homes is considerably higher today than it was 10, 15, 20, and 30 years ago. When you talk to the young students who say, I have a $100,000 debt when I graduate from college, you know that's going to impact their ability to buy a home, to have a family, to raise a family, and to live their lives. So the reality that people are going to say we don't want to pay increased taxes is our reality, and we have to adapt and change or make some fundamental transformation changes in the way we do our business. At Volunteers of America, to respond to this ever-changing environment, we have been purposeful and intentional in shaping and designing a social delivery system to best meet the needs of those most at risk and those who are most vulnerable. Our organization is committed to high-quality services to the populations that we serve. We are committed to working in partnerships with other providers and governments and the private sector to achieve our operational goals. To achieve the goal that we have set out as part of our strategic direction, we're involved in trying to embrace best practices and evidence-based practices. And the way that we do that is first to survey the programs that are in operation across the country that are either supported in the nonprofit sector or in government, to determine which of those programs is able to achieve the desired results. We also have a management team, both at the mid-level and at the senior level, that are engaged in the review of the literature to know what is considered current, what is considered evidence-based, and what is considered a best practice. We invite those kinds of information, data, and reviews into our organization to adapt and develop program. We also rely on the compliance reviews, the site reviews, and our own evaluations, which we purchase, to help guide and direct the service delivery system that we have. I'm going to share with you 3 examples of what I mean by that. When I came to Volunteers of America 11 years ago, this process was well underway. One of the realities in the Canadian criminal justice system is that they do not believe in long-term incarceration of their inmates. They believe that it is their responsibility to get them into incarceration, provide them with the rehabilitation that's necessary, and then get them back into the community as quickly as possible, because that's the best chance that you have for no recidivism. we became aware of that practice, particularly around substance abuse treatment. And at the time I was coming into the organization, we'd actually contracted with a consultant out of Canada to come look at our substance abuse treatment program to talk about what were the best practices with that high-risk population to get the desired outcome. We adapted our substance abuse treatment model to that model, and I'm real pleased to say to you that the compliance reviews, the site reviews, and the evaluations that are done of our 2 residential treatment programs present the highest outcomes that we're able to achieve in our community and statewide. So we're real pleased with that accomplishment. Because of that success, at the time, Multnomah County Chair Beth Stein was really concerned about the impact of Measure 11 on our community. We were going to see offenders returning to the community, and because those were mandatory sentences, there was not a well-established support system for those individuals coming into the community. Chair Stein contacted Volunteers of America and asked if we would be interested first in defining what that need might look like, and then seeing if we could develop a responsive system to it. We took it on and entered into a partnership with 3 other community-based organizations and developed a model that provides a wraparound support system for young men between the ages of 18 and 25 returning to the community to try with them and in a partnership to improve their chances of being successful, of returning to the community, becoming productive, being reunited with their family, their wife, their girlfriend, their children, and being able to be employable. That partnership led to us developing a proposal which we submitted to a local foundation, and they responded by saying that it needed more work and that they weren't prepared to fund it. Well, one of the things that we did, because we're kind of a risk-taking group, we went to New York and asked the Soros Foundation if they would be interested in funding this prisoner reentry model. And probably within 15 minutes of this conversation, remember we had flown 3,000 miles, there were 4 of us, 2 trustees from a foundation. Within 15 minutes they said, no, we're not going to fund you. But long story short, they connected us with another foundation which did fund us. And they funded us $500,000, which we were able to match with a local foundation, Meyer Memorial Trust, and then eventually with the Gates Foundation. I see the little time sign going up. But to make this story short, what we were able to do and demonstrate is that the model could be developed. The model was funded with soft money, and then both the Department of Corrections and Multnomah County matched that. Thirdly, we've had an evaluation component right from the onset. We have been able to demonstrate a reduction in recidivism with that population group. The point here is that it requires creativity, it requires stick-to-itiveness, it requires taking risk, it requires making sure your organization can respond to the challenges at hand. I'm going to jump to the end of my comments because I've got 1 minute and I got 10 minutes left. But anyway, one of the things I wanted to say is that we have creative program. We have it in our domestic violence program. We changed and adapted. We closed our shelter to come up with a new model that now serves over 5,000 family members as compared to 150 when we had the old model. Again, new information, data, and a new design that will be more responsive. To complete this, our organization has made a commitment to investing in an enterprise department to bring in more fungible funds, to be able to give us the most flexibility to respond to our employees, being able to fund a development department in a way that allows them to aggressively go after soft money, aggressively go after money from corporations. And I also want to leave you with this. It's absolutely essential during this period of time that nonprofits have the very best chief financial officer or director of finance that you can afford to pay, because that individual has got to be able to provide the reliable, dependable information that allows you to adjust and to change and to make decisions to close programs if they're not being able to meet the need in a fiscally sound way. So I'll stop there because my time is up. Maybe you can ask me questions, but thank you very much.
Well, good afternoon to the members of the City Club, those in the room, and those who are listening to us. I'm going to start with a little story that will take us into our theme. My wife, Kathy, and I are boating enthusiasts, and I know there are others of you in the room. And one of our favorite vacations each year, if we can do it, is a bareboat charter, usually in the American San Juans or in the Canadian Gulf Islands. And every night, our routine is, before going to bed, we check all the mooring lines or the anchor, and we listen to the weather broadcast on VHF radio. And the morning is sort of the reverse. We get up, we have our cup of coffee, and we turn on the weather forecast on the VHF radio because it's the prudent thing to do. There is not only historic, but meteorological significance to the aphorism, red sky in morning, sailors take warning. So today's presentation, as you've seen, is entitled, Is There a Nonprofit in Your Lifeboat? And that was inspired by evidence that all three of the principal sectors of our society are threatened by a protracted patch of rough seas. The public sector is in confused seas. That's filled with chop and cross current. The state has a $3.2 billion hole in its boat. The private sector has been battered since the winter of '08. It has a shortage of capital with which to expand or create jobs. And the expectation grows that the independent sector, or our nonprofit world, is the life jacket that will save the crew until help arrives to pick up everyone without a lifeboat. So my two colleagues, I think, have ably described the almost inexhaustible innovation, optimism, and concern for Oregonians that runs deep within the DNA of our nonprofit sector. But it too has seen red in the sky at dawn. And worrisome to me and to all of us is the sector is seeing unsustainable red in the funding of its operations. Now, sailors don't always disagree with red. As some of you in the room know, it's not all bad. To reach a safe harbor, we rely on red right returning, which means pass the red navigation aids on the right side, starboard side of the boat, as you're heading into port. You will be safely in a channel if you do that. Now, from the perspective of a large private foundation, and we are located rurally in Douglas County, one that works with many of the nonprofits that we know up here and you know out there, I want to examine several things with City Club today. First, a brief summary of the real conditions being experienced by nonprofit agencies, and you've heard a little bit of it. Second will be a list of capabilities or capacities required to navigate through current conditions. Call that seamanship in the present metaphor. And third is a spotlight on innovations and resources that are instructive across the independent sector. And so to the first issue, here are the voices of two senior nonprofit executives in my home county, in Douglas County. They're looking at the sea conditions, if you will, and here's what they come upon, at least 9 or more items that I will relate. The federal stimulus money is basically gone. The federal and state budget crises are happening at the same time. Everyone is pretty much in a wait-and-see mode, waiting on the election variables and the state budget for the next biennium to become clearer. Unemployment extensions are running out, and that drives household needs up. Sluggish job creation, particularly in rural communities with double-digit unemployment, exists. Nonprofit reserves have been spent. We are down to the seed corn in many cases. Public sensitivity to these needs is lessening. There was clear public compassion in 2008 and 2009 as we were struggling economically, but I think we've grown weary, and in 2010 and 11, it is not assuredly there. The public is not assuredly there with cash for all of the nonprofits that we hope to support. There is a disconnect, actually, between the rising stock market that we see and the opportunities for fundraising. And this twosome points out, it's been more than 2 years now of operations on the edge. Nonprofits and households are already operating lean. So where do they go? And for the purposes of our metaphor today, I call that, will the RMS Carpathia get to the Titanic in time syndrome? So in summary, these two nonprofit leaders that I respect think the upcoming year is going to be far worse than anything they have ever seen. Worse than anything they've seen. Both mentioned that the nonprofit coalition, which meets from time to time in Douglas County, is considering engaging in community conversations together, presenting the nonprofit state of the state or state of the county, if you will, and tackling issues together. And right there is a seed or a kernel of hope. This is a demonstration of collaboration or resilience. And it leads me then to my second topic of the capabilities and capacities required for this sector to weather the storm. Now, unlike the private sector, as we know, nonprofit sector does not have shareholders, ones who seek capital or return on investment, as we think of it in the investment world. Nonprofits have constituents, they have clients and patrons, and individuals who are, in some cases, dependent upon them for services beyond what the public sector can provide. Indeed, the public sector is transferring many responsibilities off its books to the nonprofit sector. This is clearly the case in some counties where the loss of timber revenues has brought them, the counties, to the brink of bankruptcy. To thrive or survive, Oregon nonprofits must be imbued with strong, consistent leadership at the board and executive director level. This team must be innovative, resilient, agile, and current on program design and delivery, and they must also be blessed with business acumen, too. Leadership is the key to success. It is in so many things, and without it, the whole ship we're talking about is adrift without engines, very much like the Carnival Splendor was most of this week. As with all enterprises, nonprofits need the capacities, key word, capacities to fulfill their distinct missions. The capacities required to run a healthcare organization, a food bank, a theater company, a youth or a senior center have many things in common, and that's why Kay has been successful in helping thousands with some good ideas about building capacity. Oregon has homegrown capacity building support services. They are available to the nonprofits. And this is my third point. I'd like to spotlight some resources and some innovations in Oregon's nonprofit community. The Nonprofit Association of Oregon, or NOW, which evolved from Kay's work, is the successor to TACS, is all about building a stronger independent sector, and I believe they have materials in the room today at the back. NOW's mantra, as I have discerned it, is that nonprofits in Oregon need to build their capacity, collaborate where possible, and build strong alliances. There is no better time, they say, for a statewide association to serve nonprofits, convene the sector, and to engage in meaningful public policy work. Another resource for rural nonprofits has been mentioned today, but that is the Ford Institute for Community Building, and we invest hundreds of thousands of dollars each year in individual leadership development, organizational strength, and community-wide collaborations. Those grants are available at our website, online. They are focused on rural Oregon. What comes from intentional capacity building efforts by nonprofits and community-based organizations? If you'd like to explore a nearby community that has used every tool in the collaboration box, this is rebounding now from a second 500-year flood within 11 years, look no farther than to the northwest in Columbia County at Vernonia. All three sectors that I mentioned earlier are collaborating there. They're coming to the SOS, if you will, that was broadcast by what I think of as one small, tough, smart rural community. And this will be a case study, I predict, for model behaviors on how all three sectors succeed when the need arises. And when someone says what is left in the way of innovation to perform all of these services, I'm proud first to point to Vernonia, and also to the Chalkboard Project, which presented here a year ago in July, and to the Oregon Jewel, I've got it on my lapel even today, the Oregon Cultural Trust. So I'm going to use that as another example. The Cultural Trust is a public-private collaboration in which all three sectors are contributing to the vitality and livability of the state. This year, the Trust has distributed almost $1.5 million in grants to cultural nonprofits, county and tribal coalitions, and statewide cultural agencies. And that was based on income from a year ago of over $4 million. The balance there is used for modest expenses and to build a permanent endowment. So we grow that from donations from individuals, from cultural license plate sales, and interest earned on the permanent fund. Over 11,000 Oregonians have participated. In fact, non-Oregonians participate in contributions. It's the only cultural funding program of its kind in the nation, and I think it's been compared favorably to Oregon's beach bill, vote by mail, the bottle bill, in other words, trend-setting, forward-thinking public policy. And did I mention that there are 49 days left this year for you to match your cultural donations to the Oregon Cultural Trust? The tax credit that is available is unique also across the nation. A tax credit, not a deduction. This was a tool that was granted by the legislature in a moment of plenty, and it has stood the test of time. A $500 contribution from an individual that's matching their other contributions will get a tax credit from the state, $1,000 for a couple, $2,500 from a corporation. So it has in its favor distributed leadership, high capacity, mission focus, resilience, collaboration, volunteerism, and positive outcomes. So I've got the Cultural Trust in my lifeboat, and I just take this moment to tell you that there's room in our boat for you to be on the oars with us. Please join. So my three messages today, and then we're going to take questions. There are rough and uncertain seas ahead for Oregon and its nonprofit sector, and that is a critical piece, as you've heard, of the triad with the public and private sector. Building capacity and reinforcing the nonprofit ship is a requirement of a competent crew and captain. And there are innovations and there are resources available to keep the sector running toward that safe harbor that I mentioned. So all of us would like to say thank you to the City Club for raising this to your attention, and I'm going to wish you all a calm sea with the nonprofit that's in your lifeboat. Thank you.
The first question for our speakers, as always, will be from our Friday Forum host. Our host today is City Club Governor and Board Secretary Leslie Moorhead. Leslie is a consultant providing financial management services for small businesses. She has served on City Club's research board and served as research advisor to the club's 2008 study of Oregon's initiative and referendum system. She received the club's research award in 2007. Leslie?
Thank you, Sharon. I'd like to ask our panel a question about a perennial topic, which is diversity in nonprofit organizations at all levels of staff, donors, members, and particularly governing boards. Because City Club of Portland is a membership organization, we work very hard to attract a diverse membership, and we pay close attention to the gender, age, racial, geographic, and ideological diversity of our members, and particularly on the board. But one wonders whether it is practical for an organization focused and set up on a specific guiding principle or purpose to actually be appealing to everyone on a broad scale. So I have two questions. First of all, when a nonprofit has a particular focus, whether it is social justice, the arts, the environment, public policy, or something else, how realistic and how desirable is it for the organization to try to achieve a core of board members, staff, and volunteers that's at least as diverse as its membership base and or the customers it serves? And secondly, in your organization, does making an effort to reach true diversity in your organization help meet the goals and values you've talked about, or does diversity really matter?
Well, actually, I think there is no alternative but to work towards building that diversity. When you look at the changes in Oregon's population, our audience today in this room is no longer representative of Oregon's population. And the only way that we can see our nonprofit sector truly able to serve the entire state is to be reflective at every level, at the board, at the staff, at the volunteer level. I actually think one of the most hopeful signs we have right now has come through the work here in Multnomah County of the Coalition of Communities of Color. And as many of you know, they have issued a report that is devastating in terms of the growing disparity between the education levels, health, economic levels, you name it, in communities of color compared to the white mainstream community. But there is a note of optimism, and I think it's something we are all going to be learning from in the next period, and that is that we are extremely fortunate here in Oregon to have some very long-time leaders who are from communities of color, some people who have really done amazing things, but to also have a whole group of emerging younger leaders in the communities of color who I think are actually showing the way about how the nonprofit structure can be used effectively and controlled effectively within those communities of color to bring about the change that they recognize as being needed within their own community. I think that's incredibly valuable, but I also think it doesn't change the challenge to those of us who are leading in organizations that have been traditionally white to just basically wake up and look at the census statistics and understand that Oregon is no longer a white state and that we have to reflect the cultural diversity of our population or we won't be able to change lives in the ways that really matter.
Add to that, it's the United States of America that is changing in terms of the color of the people that reside and live here. So there is no option. I had a development director from a university that was talking about the fact that they have forecasted out 40 years and they're saying that their student alumni base will be primarily students of or graduates of color. And that's going to be providing the funds for their institutions. So if you can forecast out and look at the way we will actually be, there's no choice and no option but to be much more responsive and responsible on the issue of diversity.
We will now take questions from the floor. Asking questions at Friday Forum is a privilege of City Club membership. Before asking your question, please identify yourself as a City Club member, ask your question in 30 seconds or less, and if I flash this question mark card, that means please wrap up your comments and get to your question. Thank you.
Jim Zarin, City Club member. I'm guessing that almost everybody listening to you, if not everybody, thinks that the work that Oregon's nonprofits have done is amazing, and especially in the economic times that we're in. But I want to ask you if there isn't an elephant in the room that you need to address, and we all need to address, that may require you to take your 501c3 hats off for a minute. And I'm thinking about an article I read in the Oregonian a couple weeks ago. It was a New York Times column that cited a new book by Robert Reich that basically documents that over the last 4 or 5 decades, there's been a steady increase in the percentage of national income that is received by the top 1% of our population from, I think it's 15% to 25% or something like that. And then there was an article by Robert Reich in the Oregonian 2 days ago saying that the fact is that there's two economies right now in the United States, and one of them is doing just fine, and it's that top 1% again. And isn't that really the elephant in the room in terms of the amount of resources that are available? You can't expect the middle class that traditionally supported these programs to support them and support government if there is no middle class. And I'm curious if you're fighting battles but losing the war, and we're all fighting battles and losing the war, and if you have any comments about that.
Well, I think the former secretary has a point that's well taken. We certainly see in philanthropy that there is a steady growth of formal philanthropies being created because of generational wealth changes. We also know that individuals who have built wealth, and I'm thinking now of the Gateses and the Buffetts and others, are actually collaborating, talking together about the responsible approach to redistributing some of that wealth so that it can benefit. But I think your point is that if we have a declining middle class, if we have no engine within the center of the economy, is there a way to fund not only the public sector, but the nonprofit sector? And I won't quibble with the worrisome assumption that it will decline.
I will add to that. I hope you can hear me. I will add to that that I think this economic collapse, both at the federal and the state level, gives us an opportunity to really think about transformation and fundamental change. We have not really addressed, I don't think on any level, structural changes that might generate a new way of funding the services that we provide, both in government and also in the nonprofit sector. And I think if we rise to that challenge, that we really want to look at structurally how we do our business and what services we support, both in government and in the nonprofit sector, we might really find out that we can do what needs to be done and also preserve that middle class and make those that are in the underclass rise to the middle class. I'm very optimistic about that.
And I would just add a note of optimism. As you know, I teach at Portland State, and if you have visited the classrooms of graduate schools lately, you will see a generation of young people who are tremendously interested in mastering the skills of business to use those skills for public good. And I believe that we are going to see the impact of generational shift in which young people have a different set of values than the values that have led us to those two economies. And I think it is as they deepen their understanding of how impossible this reality that we've been building really is, that we're going to see a force for change.
Ted Kay, City Club member. A question for Norm about the Cultural Trust. I want you to know I mailed my check last week. Thank you for the reminder. And I've supported the trust at the maximum every year that it has existed. However, my confidence in the trust was deeply shaken in the recent past when it was viewed by the legislature as a pot of money that it could raid to balance the state budget. Would you comment on how my confidence might be restored?
Well, and I'd like to point out that there was a note of indignation there that I liked. There was, in a budget rebalancing more than a year ago, a sweep of all other funds that the legislature had within its purview. Much to the chagrin of those of us on the trust board, it included the revenues from the license plates that you and I may have purchased with the full donative intent of supplying the trust with $30. It was a gift. It was not a deposit in some people's opinions that I think you share to the general fund. Notwithstanding, the legislature did perform a sweep on a number of accounts. We were one of them. And it is the first time, frankly, out of indignation that I was convinced that those who want to perpetuate the arts, humanities, and history in this state at some level, that indignation was palpable and that we knew there was a constituency out there. I am reassured by voices in Salem on a regular basis that probably won't happen again. But we all know that every 2 years it is a new legislature with a new mandate and a new set of obligations that will take up the policy issue. We actually are desirous of having the Oregon Cultural Trust set up in such a way that it is truly a trust and not just a fund within the state of Oregon. So thank you for that question.
Vandana Shrestha, City Club member. My question has to do with volunteers and volunteerism. You all mentioned volunteers as an important part of nonprofits. And in this climate, obviously it's not just the nonprofits that are being affected by the bad economy, but also volunteers. And as traditional retirement becomes more of a dream for most of us, how are nonprofits prepared in terms of thinking about how they're going to engage volunteers? How will nonprofits have to do business differently when it comes to engaging volunteers in an effective way and leveraging their assets, while also keeping in mind that volunteers are going to most likely needing to be at work, going to secure their own futures?
One of the realities is that I actually think there are more individuals that are prepared to volunteer today for two reasons. One, because of the high unemployment rate. Our experience is that we have individuals who are seeking employment who offer to volunteer their time because they have time to give, but also as an opportunity to have an entree into an organization. Secondly, there's a great new organization that has emerged on the Portland Community College campus called Life by Design, and their whole focus is to work with individuals 50 years of age or older who have either retired or are unemployed who want to do something really responsible with their lives. And so they actually have a curriculum designed to help them look at what they can do with their time, also have resources in terms of where they can refer these individuals to. And I'm very optimistic that this model that, again, has been developed in Portland is going to become a nationwide model. So I think there actually is a larger reservoir of individuals who are willing to resign. Specifically at Volunteers of America, we have this outstanding volunteer coordinator who does bring volunteers into our organization as the quote-unquote unpaid staff and does a fabulous job of training them to be the unpaid staff to enhance the work that we do with our programs.
Good afternoon. My name is Carrie Hoops. I'm the Executive Director of the Nonprofit Association of Oregon and a City Club member. And my question for the panel, you've addressed a whole bunch of challenges that the sector is facing. I'm curious what you think the role of the nonprofit sector should be in public policy, advocacy, and elections.
I think there is an emerging recognition that an awful lot of what the society is seeking has tentacles, if not direct connections, to policies that are set by government. 501c3s are designed in part to address advocacy and public policy. That's not the case for a private foundation, but it is for a public charity. And I think you'll see more in the way of philanthropy funding not just the services directly performed by nonprofits, but implicitly, not explicitly, the other part of your missions, which would include having appropriate policies that make sense with your work. So it is something that people are less timid talking about. I think we see more of it from nonprofits. And I can tell you that the philanthropic world, when we meet together, talk about the limitations that are put upon some of us and not others, such as the community foundations, but that the importance is to have policy and program in alignment. So I think it's a growing understanding that this is important.
I think that we have to realize that if you look around this room and you look at our radio audience, we are the people who are involved with nonprofit organizations in every community in the state. And because of that involvement, we have direct knowledge of what is going on in our communities. And it is totally possible to translate that knowledge into motivating the people we work with to actually express their opinions on public policy. And I think one of our habits in Oregon has been to be a little bit conservative and a little bit hesitant about realizing on the board level that we really can, within the purview of the IRS rules, we really can help our program participants, our volunteers, and our board members learn how to speak out about the public policy issues that matter most. And that's actually one of the most exciting things about the Nonprofit Association of Oregon that Carrie heads, is the extent to which they are beginning to help nonprofits mobilize these aware individuals in every community. And it takes us back to our first questioner: how are we going to see the major shifts in public policy that are necessary to build the communities we want? Well, it's going to be when those of us who have contacts with everyday Oregonians actually learn how to mobilize the views of those Oregonians and help them speak out.
I'll just add to that quickly that I'm a member of the Board of Directors for the Oregon Community Foundation, and in our strategic planning process, one of the outcomes is that we are going to really focus on trying to fund those to fund catalytic leadership that will lead to the discussion that will lead to public policy changes. I think it is a requirement, if you are involved in providing services to the public, that you also have a role in advocacy and public policy.
Chris Lallman, City Club member. My question follows this lady's and the first questioner, in that with this big elephant in the room, with the fact that we're hearing all about austerity measures, raising the retirement age to 69, we also have facing us in this lame duck Congress the potential of changing our tax structure. As you view what is happening with policy changes and what your roles are and how you are potentially hamstrung by being a 501c3 and having board members that are not only wealthy and from corporations, how do you view what you do in order to ensure that we have a strong middle class and a healthy society to make sure that equity is addressed by our tax code? Thank you.
I guess as a former state legislator, I've had some responsibility and accountability for state tax code, but federal tax code is actually, ironically, under the purview of the IRS, and the IRS is the regulatory agency along with the State Department of Justice over the charitable part of the sector we're talking about. I, for one, find it a bit of a hamstring to be in a prohibited position as a private foundation from directly engaging in advocacy and public policy. But there are perfectly legitimate ways to attempt that. And so I'm going to give you just a comparative model. If you wanted to address the tax code, then there are organizations that are prepared, well prepared intellectually to do that. But it's very difficult, I think, for a sector with 15,000 organizations in this state to even speak with one voice about this. One person's equity might be another person's inequity, and so that is the great balancing act of our society.
And I actually think that often our nonprofit boardrooms can be the place where a discussion of these issues is fairly meaningful. And it is striking to me as I work with boards of directors to have board members who understand so deeply how important the service that they are delivering is and still have great resistance to advocating for the public policies that would make it possible. And I'll just tell you one story to close on that. I was with the board of a large mental health agency several weeks ago, and they were discussing the budget cuts that Kay talked to us about. And around the room, I saw the corporate leaders and other very wealthy individuals on this board have a light bulb experience in the discussion. And one by one, they said, that is going to be the most wasteful budget cut ever made. When you throw people out of our mental health services, they will be in our prisons, and we will pay for them. And I think that creating the opportunity in our boardrooms for some people who may not really understand the connection between our tax structure and the overall long-term health of our economy to explore in a way that's meaningful to them what these connections are. I think that's one of the things that we can do within our nonprofit organizations. We're not all going to agree, but having the discussion is going to be a very powerful tool.
And I would add just quickly, time up.
We have run out of time for further questions, and we'll have to stop for the day. I am sure, though, that you'd all like to join us next week when we honor and hear from 4 of Portland's youngest nonprofit leaders at the annual Skidmore Prize ceremony. So as we close, please join me in expressing our appreciation to today's guests, Kay Sohl, Kay Toran, and Norm Smith. We are adjourned.